Okay, I guess it's time to start. Welcome everyone. My name is Barend van Gemeren. I'm with BirdLife International. I'm the coordinator of BirdLife's Global Flyways program, and that's looking after all the migratory birds in the world. I hope you know BirdLife. If not, you will learn more about what we do and why we do it. This is a webinar as part of a series of webinars that we celebrate migration and the World Migratory Bird Day. I have a few announcements to make. This session will be recorded, so just so that you know, and we will send you the link afterwards where you can look at it again. There will be 2 presentations. During the presentations, you can ask questions. If you go down with your cursor, you will find in the bottom a Q&A. This is where you can put your questions. It will be helpful if you indicate which of the 2 speakers you would love, which of any of the speakers you would like the question to be answered by. Otherwise, Gabi and myself will decide who to direct the question to. Don't hesitate if you feel that asking the question in English is not your strength. Please do it in any other language and we'll try to find a way around it. We're especially good in Spanish, not me, but the others. And so that should be good. So now handing over to Itala.
Thank you, Barend. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar. My name is Itala Yepes, and I am the Head of Conservation at BirdLife International in the Americas. And today we are here to celebrate migration. I am absolutely thrilled to introduce you to 2 amazing conservationists that work for BirdLife Partners organizations in the America. The first one, Andrew Rotman from ABC. Andrew is a graduate of the University of Wisconsin-Stevens Point and holds a degree in biology and wildlife management. Andrew has been working on international bird conservation issues since 2000, when he founded the Rainforest Biodiversity Group in Costa Rica and helped establish the first birding trail in Central America. He has been with the American Bird Conservancy for the past 10 years, where he is the director for wintering ground conservation. Andrew's work focuses on developing and implementing conservation projects that conserve habitats for declining migratory birds. Andrew, who is originally from Madison, Wisconsin, was previously a wildlife educator and naturalist at Horen Marsh with the Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources and the executive director of the Sarapiqui Conservation Learning Center in Costa Rica. Andrew, welcome again, and over to you.
All right, let's see if I can share my screen properly here. All right, are we looking good? Okay.
Sorry, we're not seeing your screen yet.
How about now?
Yeah.
There we go. Okay, sorry about that. Well, thanks Itala for the introduction. Again, I'm Andrew Rothman, the Director of Wintering Grounds Conservation for American Bird Conservancy. I'm really happy to be here today with BirdLife. As some of you may or may not know, American Bird Conservancy is now an official partner of BirdLife. So really thrilled to be here celebrating World Migratory Bird Day with BirdLife and all of the partners of the BirdLife network. And so today I'm going to be talking about an initiative that ABC has launched to help target conservation of migratory birds throughout their full life cycle. And that initiative is our Birdscape Initiative. So I'm going to walk you a bit through that. But I'm going to start with a little bit of an overview of American Bird Conservancy for those who may not know a lot about us yet. Our organization is 25 years old. We just had our 25-year anniversary this past year, and our mission is to conserve native birds of the Americas and their habitat. So our organization works throughout the Americas, and we work focusing on conservation through our conservation pyramid here. And so we focus on protecting the most rare species, including those that are designated AZE species or Alliance for Zero Extinction. We are the global secretariat for the Alliance for Zero Extinction. We also conserve and protect habitats for all birds, and we also have work toward eliminating threats for all birds, be it anthropogenic, including collisions, as well as non-anthropogenic, focusing on reduction of mortality due to cats. And much of our work is based on, as you'll see, partnerships, capacity building, and science. Again, much of our work focuses on protection of habitat, and in particular for highly endangered species. As such, over the years, ABC has been able to create multiple reserves, actually nearly 100 reserves in Latin America, protecting nearly, actually over now, 1 million acres. And currently, we have ongoing activities with 43 different partner institutions and organizations in 15 countries. We work on habitat restoration. We planted over 6 million trees and coffee plants with our work in Latin America, and we've worked to restore over 20,000 acres. And we also recognize that the conservation of bird habitat also has additional benefits. So protection of water resources, helping to sustain local economies, even mitigating climate change through protection of forests, and also maintaining cultures. And in this way, we recognize that there is this connection between birds and communities. And speaking about birds, in particular migratory birds, we know that migratory birds are in trouble. Last year, when the article about 3 billion birds being lost in the last 40 years came out in Science, this again shed the spotlight on the situation that birds and migratory birds face. And in particular, nearly 50 species of birds have lost nearly 50% of their populations in the last 40 years. So we know that we need to do something about birds and their conservation. And of course, the ecology of migratory birds is interesting because it focuses to work at different scales. We must work at a full life cycle level to conserve these birds. This graphic here helps show that, while we focus much of the research and much of our conservation activities on breeding grounds here in the US and in Canada, much of the year of our migratory birds is actually spent on their wintering grounds. And of course, the condition of wintering ground habitat is going to influence reproductive success, and condition of reproductive habitat is going to help facilitate or not the migration back to the wintering ground. So what we do throughout the life cycle is important, as events in the annual cycle are inextricably linked. So knowing that these birds migrate throughout the hemisphere, where should we be working to conserve them? Partners in Flight and American Bird Conservancy and other organizations that are members of Partners in Flight have identified a whole slew of priority migratory bird species. There is a red list and a yellow list of watch list species. And the 3 Billion Birds report has helped to guide what species we should be really focusing our conservation efforts on. And so the ecology of these birds help guide us of where we should be working. So if we use an example of wood thrush, we have an idea of where these birds are breeding, as well as where they're wintering. New technologies, MODIS tags, geolocators are helping us also to better understand and unlock some of the mysteries of migration, helping to link specific breeding populations with specific locations on their wintering grounds. Additionally, species like wood thrush do come together with other species on their wintering grounds, and this is a cluster analysis from Kara Jose of the Central Hardwoods joint venture that helps to show that protecting wood thrush habitat on the wintering grounds is also going to be beneficial for a slew of other species, including many of them that are considered priority. So that brings us to our Birdscape Initiative and the idea that we really need to identify and target specific landscapes, both on the breeding grounds as well as the wintering grounds of where these species are. And we need to work not only the reserve scale, but we need to work at a landscape scale. So our birdscapes are between 150,000, even up to 1 million hectares. And within these birdscapes, we are targeting multiple conservation actions. Of course, we need to maintain habitat protection. We need to restore areas that have been lost, but also working with people on what we might call working lands to make them more productive for birds. So in this way, we recognize that humans are part of the system. This is not an initiative where we're just focusing on setting aside land and keeping people off it, so to say, but we really want to bring humans into the landscape and do it in a way that can be beneficial for birds. And birdscapes can be an organizing tool and a way of bringing together diverse sectors and diverse groups of people to guide local action and also, of course, measure the results of those actions. So our birdscape program has identified nearly 100 birdscapes throughout the Americas. This map does not clearly represent all of them, but it gives you an idea of kind of the size and shape of the areas that we're looking to be working in. The green ones are birdscapes where we are active. I have to say this is a little bit older map, and we do have other birdscapes where we are working that are active, such as in Honduras and in Nicaragua. But it gives you an idea of where we're working and the scale at which we're trying to work. So again, we're looking to identify these birdscapes based on our priority species, where their habitats are, both in the breeding grounds as well as the wintering grounds. So if we zoom in a little bit and take a look at one location, this is the Conservation Coast birdscape in Guatemala. This is Caribbean Guatemala here. This is the Bay of Honduras. This is Belize. This is Honduras. This is the Department of Izabal in Guatemala, in an area where we know with thrush winter and some stopover. And so we recognize that we need to take action to maintain the forest patches that are there. And we're working with our partner Fundaeco to do that. But we also recognize that migratory birds need not just reserves, they need functional landscapes. And in this way, we need to integrate conservation into production systems. And so this is a shot from Nicaragua at the edge of a reserve. You can see that there's encroachment from agriculture and even cattle. And so we need to find ways to make these non-forest systems more compatible with bird conservation. So in that way, our birdscape approach, we try to expand not only to focus on the areas that are forest, but how do we expand conservation actions on other areas outside of those forests and in the buffer zone, so to say. And so that's where we see the opportunity to integrate conservation into local economic opportunities. You know, there are multiple land uses going on, and we need to find a way to have those land uses be more compatible with bird habitat to be able to provide better conditions for our migratory birds. And so opportunities through agroforestry, many of us are aware of shade coffee, but there are multiple other agroforestry systems that we can look at in trying to be able to provide better habitat for birds and also help people make a living. Timber management, ranching activities, silvopasture, and even carbon projects can be ways that can present some economic solution to some of our conservation problems. Again, just to look at some different opportunities for bird-friendly businesses, so to say, spices. Many of us are familiar with cacao and coffee. Sustainable grazing, not just of cattle, but also of goats. This is actually a photo from a project in the Bahamas where we're working to help manage habitat for Kirtland's warbler using improved grazing techniques for goats. And of course, tourism, bird tourism can help bring dollars and economic opportunities to those places where our birds go. So organizing our birdscapes for the practitioners out there, what are some of the things that we do and need to take into consideration when developing these birdscapes? Of course, we're looking to identify current and potential habitat, but also current and potential partners. Oftentimes, we tend to focus on conservation organizations, but there are many other entities working within these landscapes that we need to connect to. Some of them social, some economic, as well as government, and really everything in between. We can then prioritize these sites and the types of conservation activities that we need to take at them or with them. And we also need to gather an understanding of the products and kind of the economic drivers, the types of products and land uses that are going on out there, but also understand the markets, the supply chains, and business opportunities. I say this in part because we can't suggest that people plant trees in their coffee or in their cacao, but that's adding responsibility and perhaps costs even to what they're already doing. So if we don't suggest these changes and provide some kind of link to improved markets or better prices, we're kind of adding burden without providing better economic opportunities for those producers. So we need to understand the marketplace, the business opportunities associated with trying to improve production practices. And then on the bird and habitat side, we need to identify the ecological factors most important to bird response, to positive bird response, and then test and development some of those production recommendations. And of course, implement conservation action, whether it be protection, restoration, or through these working lands, and then measure response of those conservation actions at different levels: birds, biodiversity, economics, communities. So really, our Birdscape model, we're trying to expand the typical bird conservation model so that we bring together additional sectors and that we can facilitate restoration and protection of bird habitat and provide incentive to avoid and reduce deforestation. Of course, we want to maintain forest that's on the landscape, and so trying to find incentives to keep habitat as habitat is a key action that we need to do, in addition to providing technical assistance that can help producers modify production practices in a way that, again, is going to be more beneficial for birds. But we also need to have that key of connecting those producers to a marketplace to have better economic opportunities. And then we need to figure out a way to be able to scale that up within these priority targeted landscapes that we've identified. And with that, our hope is that we will have a positive benefit, not only on birds and the environment, which can, again, help protect water sources, et cetera, reduce effects of climate change, capture carbon, but also economic and social impacts. So in this way, we see our Birdscape approach kind of a symbiotic relationship, so to say, with sustainable development opportunities and moving towards the sustainable development goals of the UN, and also linking to what many governments have committed to through different initiatives, such as the 20 by 20 initiative, as well as the Convention on Biological Diversity. So again, we feel like there's a great opportunity here to link the goals and objectives of the partners with Partners in Flight, BirdLife International, those members of NABC, and even down to specific conservation groups such as the Alianza a las Doradas, really link those goals with these sustainable development and government goals, and that this opportunity can provide benefit for people and birds. So with that, I'd like to wish everybody, again, happy World Migratory Bird Day. I appreciate you guys being here today. Happy to be here. I look forward to any questions or comments. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Andrew. Just a reminder, please be sure to type your questions into the Q&A box in your control panels. So now I would like to welcome Liz Hennessy from Audubon. Liz is the program associate for Audubon's International Alliances program, where she helps to manage bird conservation work on the ground in Latin America and the Caribbean with and through Audubon's many international partners. Liz received her bachelor's in environmental sciences from University of Florida and the master's in ecology from the University of Georgia. Liz has experience working in environmental conservation in the US, Colombia, Ecuador, and Costa Rica. Before joining Audubon, Liz spent a year as a Fulbright scholar in Costa Rica working on community-based mangrove reforestation and blue carbon projects. Liz, over to you. Thank you and welcome.
Thank you, Itala, for that introduction, and thank you for the invitation to speak today. It's unfortunate that Andrew and I didn't run into each other down there in Costa Rica. I didn't realize we were both down there. But anyways, just give me a second and I will share my screen. Okay. You guys see that okay?
Yes.
Yes, okay, great. So I work for the National Audubon Society, and we are the BirdLife partner in the United States. And today I'm very excited to be speaking to you about how we are working to really elevate our conservation impact on the ground for migratory birds. And this here is the international team. We formed the International Alliances program at National Audubon Society, and since I started at Audubon about 3 years ago, the team has really grown and evolved. This top row here, we kind of hold things down, the United States and in HQ, so to speak. And then down here, as you can see, we have staff down in Colombia and Chile, which is where we do work on the ground. And I'm sure most of you are very, very familiar with this graphic, but the birds really do lead us to the work, lead us to where we are down in Latin America and the Caribbean. So about half of the birds that breed in the United States and in Canada spend more than half of their lives down there. And, you know, as Andrew mentioned, we've lost about 3 billion birds since 1970. And of those 3 billion birds, 2.5 billion of those were migratory species. So it's a huge issue and one that we're all really working to solve. There are 6 general threats ranging from development to clearing of land for agriculture or for cattle production, for example. And at Audubon, we think that knowing the threats and how they are projected to change can really help us to focus our efforts and to develop effective action plans to conserve migratory birds. So data on threats is one type of information being used by Audubon's Migratory Bird Initiative, or the MBI. MBI is a collaborative initiative that partners with organizations like Smithsonian, Cornell, BirdLife, and it has a goal of really having the best possible information available for all of us practitioners so we can really understand the habitats that are being used by migratory birds. And this graphic here was actually created using a combination of eBird data and geolocator information. So we're really, you know, finding these synergies between data types and having the best possible information. And the idea is that MBI will create a platform that will shift attention from the breeding grounds and instead focus on the entire life cycle of the birds. And this is another product that was created by MBI. This one depicts migratory birds that have been re-encountered in Colombia after being tagged. And I think it's interesting to note that as the birds winter down in Colombia, as you can see, they are actually tending to concentrate in much smaller areas. Based on MBI's research and on the best possible peer-reviewed science out there, we have determined that in order to protect 10% of global populations of 160 different migratory species, we will need to protect and conserve 193 million hectares across the hemisphere. That's a huge goal, and there's really no way that Audubon alone can tackle that. It will really require collaboration and scaling up all of the great work that the BirdLife partners are doing across the entire hemisphere. And you can expect to hear a little bit more about this goal as we continue to develop our business plan. We are in the process of creating a new business plan that will guide our work over the next decade, and we expect to launch it at the beginning of 2021. So stay tuned for more on that goal. And so we have all of this data and we have information on where we can really have the greatest conservation impact. And now I want to share with you what that looks like on the ground. Starting with Audubon's Boreal Forest Program, which is led by Dr. Jeff Wells, our VP of Boreal Conservation. North America's Boreal Forest is one of the largest intact forest ecosystems left on Earth. It is also North America's bird nursery, home to nearly 400 bird species that breed in or rely on its forests, and that leads to billions of birds being born there each year and then wandering out. But unfortunately, this habitat is being threatened by a variety of things like development for roads, for pipelines. There's a lot of threats from logging and from the forestry industry. And so in order to counteract these threats, Audubon is a part of a coalition along with Pew and Ducks Unlimited that is aiming to conserve 50% of the forest by 2050. And so this initiative focuses on really having big scale impact and conserving large and interconnected areas rather than these piecemeal, smaller fragmented areas like we focused on before. And a really big piece of this work and a major aspect of what we're trying to do there is to support Indigenous groups to declare and then manage protected areas. So a lot of research has proven that Indigenous people are really the key to protecting lands. Indigenous-run protected areas tend to have lower deforestation rates and slower species declines. And these realizations are going hand in hand with a big Indigenous-led conservation movement in Canada right now, where Indigenous groups are actually working directly with the Canadian government to advance conservation on the ground by declaring new areas, improving management, things like that. And so while a lot of work has been done, there's still a lot more to do to reach the goal of 50% by 2050. But we have good news that came out of Canada this week, actually. Canada just signed on to the Convention for Biological Diversity Initiative to protect 30% of its territory by 2030. And so we're hopeful that these numbers that you see here on the screen will just continue to grow. Beyond the Boreal, we are working to really build a constituency of stakeholders that advocate for birds and for the places that the birds need. And a big piece of that is to develop and implement bird-based tourism. To date, we have done bird-based tourism work in 5 different countries, in Belize, Bahamas, Paraguay, Guatemala, and in Colombia. For us, bird-based tourism is really an initiative to build value for birds. We see it as a tool that can really help to promote economic development in local communities while also building support for conservation of bird habitats. As I mentioned, we've done bird-based tourism work in a couple of different countries, and I just want to touch on the work in Belize and some of the results from those efforts. We did that work with the Belize Audubon Society, our BirdLife partner there. And as we can see from this slide, the work that we did there, training guides, developing birding trails, led to an increase in yearly income for small businesses related to bird watching, led to an increase in income for the trained bird guides, and also just created new jobs for people in the industry that didn't exist before. And then beyond the people impacts, we also saw a 99% reduction in poaching in Coxcomb, which is a wildlife area that is managed by Belize Audubon Society. Our most recent efforts in bird-based tourism have been in Colombia, where we have created 4 different birding trails, which are depicted on this map. Working with Livelihoods, our BirdLife partners there, we have been able to train over 400 local community members to be bird guides. And the birding trails that we have created cover 1,500 species of birds and are able to impact 2.6 million acres of protected areas, both private and public. Now I have a little video on the Southwestern Andes birding trail that I'm going to play for you guys.
The idea of the program is to improve the capacity of the communities to take birders into their protected areas. They need tools, they need the way to use the resources they have around in a peaceful way to make a living, and this is an amazing opportunity for them. Since they don't need to invest that much, they don't need to go through a difficult process of education. Most of them already know the birds of the community or the birds of their surrounding. Is just to give them the tools to use that local knowledge and turn it into an opportunity of making some extra income.
The Southwest Birding Trail is very important for the region or for Colombia because it's the most diverse trail for birds in Colombia. The local community are very interested in to promote these different departments like the Valle del Cauca, and Nariño, because this department of this area in the past it had conflict.
Oops, sorry, I just cut it short, but I hope that gave you a little idea of the work that we're doing down there, especially in the southwestern region of Colombia. And so birding trails aren't just about the birds, they're also about the people that form the trail. This is Maria de Rosario Cortez. She participated in the training in the Southwestern Andes, which was just shown in the video. She actually had to leave her land, her farmland, in the 1980s because of the conflict in Colombia, but then was able to return in 2009. And since then, she has really devoted her efforts to bring nature-based tourism to her farm. And by participating in the training, bird tourism has helped her to be able to generate income and to be able to continue to manage her farm and safely stay in the region. Along with developing the bird tourism itself, we have also worked with the same groups that were included in the trainings to develop conservation agreements. These conservation agreements are proposed by and led by local community members. They generally take place along the trails themselves, and they include things like creating monitoring programs for migratory birds or building nurseries to grow trees that are then planted to create corridors for birds. So basically just creating more habitat for birds in the landscape. And I really just want to emphasize that our bird-based tourism work is truly aiming to be holistic and to empower local communities to be able to conserve their natural resources in a way that also supports their livelihoods. And lastly, I want to touch on our coastal resilience work, which builds off the two shorebird plans, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with, the Pacific Flyway and Atlantic Flyway shorebird plans. Our coastal work recognizes both challenges and opportunities in the area. We recognize that coastal development will continue to grow and to cause more habitat loss. We also recognize that climate change will continue to threaten coastlines and the birds that depend on them. But we also recognize the opportunity of potentially connecting big coastal development projects with the protection of ecosystem services and building resilience in local communities. Some results to date of our coastal work include in the Bahamas, where working with the Bahamas National Trust, we were able to leverage pipe plover monitoring data to convince the government to conserve 94,000 acres of land on the Jolter Cays. It's now a new protected area. And so that will continue to improve habitat and protect piping plovers into the future. And then in Panama, working with Panama Audubon Society, we were able to help support the protection of 250,000 acres of coastal wetlands in the Bay of Panama. The Bay of Panama is an incredibly important site for migratory shorebirds, and it provides habitat for about 30% of the western sandpiper population. Looking forward, we're really excited to continue to expand our coastal work. We are officially beginning the implementation of a new Inter-American Development Bank funded project in the Bay of Panama and the Bay of Parita. Working alongside Panama Audubon Society, we are aiming to include the carbon, blue carbon, so to speak, stored in mangrove areas in Panama's nationally determined contributions under the Paris Agreement, so what they've committed to do to combat climate change as a country. And we're also hoping to promote the use of natural infrastructure as opposed to built or gray solutions along the coast to create habitat and then to also benefit coastal populations by reducing risks. And so we expect that this project will really elevate the importance of mangroves and coastal wetlands and the role that they play for birds. With that, thank you so much for your time and for listening to our approach and our efforts to be able to really achieve full life cycle conservation of migratory birds across the hemisphere.
Thank you so much, Liz.
Stop sharing.
We will go ahead now and take some time to answer your questions. Barend?
Apologies. So quite a few questions have come in. Let's start with Andrew. So there's a question from Lynn Smith. Smith, how many of these countries in the Americas recognize global climate change and its causes, and what actions are they implementing?
Yeah, first, lots of good questions, so thank you for those. I think we'll try to get to as many as we can, and those that we can't, maybe as we are exiting, I'll try to answer some directly. But yeah, I think that in Latin America, from my experience, many of the countries are kind of more cognizant of the impacts of climate change and recognize them more so than I would say here in the US. In part, their impact is often felt more in some places than in the US. I think that the causes are fairly widely agreed upon as much of the science across most of the world. And many of the countries have signed on to the Paris Accord. And toward that end, there is, for instance, the Bond Challenge, and that led to this 20 by 20 initiative that is being led by the World Resource Institute. And that initiative has a goal of restoring 20 million hectares of forest by the year 2020. Clearly we're at 2020, we didn't necessarily meet that goal, but that's expanded to be 50 million hectares by the year 2030. So there are commitments being made by these countries in Central America, South America, to restore habitat, protect habitat, and restore habitat for birds, which is, of course, helping to reduce the impact of climate change. And those initiatives in part are being funded through different multinational funding agencies such as the Global Environmental Facility, World Bank, UN, etc. And so these countries definitely recognize it and are at least trying to make commitments, and hopefully with the funds available through, say, the Jeff Star allocation, make some headway toward those commitments.
Okay, excellent. I'm just skimming through the questions. So there's one question is, where can we buy the chocolate? Which is, thank you. Can Andrew provide a link to products we can, in the United States, purchase to support economic work? Most of us get shade-grown coffee, but what else is out there? Question from Karen White. And there was another question similar to this.
Yeah, I saw that. There's again, good questions. And many of these markets and marketplaces are kind of just getting started. Of course, Smithsonian and their website, I can put it in the chat, but they have a website of where you can buy the bird-friendly certified coffee. Of course, that is the product that most people are aware of, but cacao and chocolate in particular are products that are being produced in ways that are friendly to birds. And right now, ABC is working with a small company called Sorsal Cacao, or Rainforest Chocolate. There's a DBA in there. And they source from Dominican Republic, and their product actually comes from a reserve that helps protect habitat for Bicknell's thrush, and then also they purchase from producers around that reserve as well. So I don't believe that there is any particular one site where you can find all of these products. It's a good idea, and I think maybe BirdLife and ABC and Audubon should create that along with our partners at Smithsonian. And I think that that's a need, certainly. But again, if you want to follow up with me, I can try to put you in contact with some other types of products. And also just kind of looking at the questions and some follow-up ideas. Black pepper is a product that I mentioned that we're working with in Guatemala, and I'm not sure if people shop at Costco, but there was just an article in the Costco magazine that they're sourcing their black pepper from a sustainable project in Vietnam. So there's of course need for some of these different products, and part of our goal is to try to find that market link. So maybe in a couple of years, Costco can be providing Conservation Coast black pepper. Who knows? But that'd be a good goal.
Excellent. So David Bohr is interested whether it's just for the international market, the products you're. Is it for the export only, or also using it to raise awareness in local economies?
Well, I think that we need to work at all levels. In part, the market influence, the global market is going to influence the prices for export markets, and there are those opportunities. But even helping producers develop multiple products that they can produce on a farm that can be sold in local marketplace. Helping them to understand the diversification of their products that they can produce. Maybe some is for an export market, maybe some is for use in local markets that can be sold, say for instance, in Guatemala and Guatemala City, or even within the department. So I think we need to work at all levels.
Excellent. So Itala, do you allow me to move to Liz?
Go ahead, Barend.
Yeah, so there's a question for Liz. So now that it's from Andres, apologies, Achondo. Now that tourism is dormant all over the world, how is Audubon supporting the communities that depend on birdwatching ecotourism for their livelihoods?
Sure, yeah, that's a really great question, and one that we're thinking about pretty often. Tourism really has slowed down, and I think it's been bad in some cases economically, but I also think it's presented an opportunity to really stop and pause for a second, take a step back and work on improving things, work on building out trainings, and really plan on how we can come back and be better than ever before. It's also helped us to shift a focus to domestic tourism, which is a market that we haven't really thought about before. In Colombia in particular, we usually are thinking about bringing in people from the US or from Europe, but there's a huge interest in tourism domestically, and so it's allowed us to consider that and to see how we can push that forward. But for us, it's allowed us to really evaluate our program and to have a plan for how to bring things back. And I think that now we have talked about biosecurity protocols for once tourism does start happening again, and I think that it will bounce back more than ever. I mean, I don't know about you, but I can't wait to get on an airplane again. And so I think once it's possible, I think things will be roaring and business will be back.
Excellent. So Liz, another question related to the tourism side of things. Does Audubon's work also include strengthening local tourism agencies formed with trained guides, or is it foreign agencies that establish this link? It's a question from Juan Carlos Valaroso. Sorry for my pronunciation.
Yeah, thank you, Juan, for that question. So we, in particular, do focus on local tourism agencies, and in Colombia, we make it a point to partner with those local agencies, because otherwise the funding that comes from that stays in the hands of foreigners, and that kind of defeats the purpose of the program. But I didn't really get into the details of our program, but essentially what we do when we come in and create a birding trail is, one, find the different sites along the trail that we want to include. And so that involves working with protected areas, both private and public, and that includes engaging those people. And it also includes a training for local businesses. So working with restaurants and with hotels to make sure that they know how to handle bird tourists, because it's a little bit different, right? You have people coming in and wanting a cup of coffee at 4 a.m. to go out and bird for the day. So it's something as simple as making sure that you have breakfasts ready to go, lunches ready to go. And really, we do try to emphasize working with local community members to make sure that the money that comes in stays in those local areas. And, we partner with Mannequin, for example, and other groups down in Colombia to make that happen.
Okay, excellent. How much time have we left, Itala? There's still a few questions.
We have 13 minutes. I suggest we go for 5-6 more minutes with questions, and then we're going to do a little summary, if that's okay.
Okay. I'm just to highlight that there are people from all over the world joining. So there's somebody from India, Waindrila, and he has a question to Andrew, which I hope Andrew understands, because I'm a bit at a loss. So greetings from India. I want to ask Andrew that you can shed some light on how much local migration affects their breeding ground recognition and response to ecological factors. Fairly ecological question.
Yeah, and I'm not totally sure I understand the question or can answer, but what I can try to say is that we certainly are recognizing more and more some of the movements that are more local in regards to migration when on the wintering grounds. For instance, veery is a migratory species here in the hemisphere that on their wintering grounds, they will use multiple different sites. Shorebirds will do the same thing. So, we certainly need to be thinking about that in terms of our conservation strategy and conservation delivery. It seems as if, most of these species, despite the fact that they might make different wintering ground local migrations or local movements, have this propensity to return to the same areas or close to. So I'm not sure that, there's evidence that shows that these local migrations are affecting where they go on their wintering grounds. Might be other people here that can better answer that question that are in the audience, but I hope that at least gives some sort of answer to part of the question.
Excellent. So I have a final question for both of you. It is from Eduardo. He has a question for Andrew, but I think it's relevant also for Liz. So what is your opinion about private land conservation mechanism, such as acquiring land for reserves? Do you use them or do you support them, and why? Thanks. So Liz, perhaps you could.
Sure. I mean, I think that all types of land conservation are important, private and public, right? You can't just do one and not the other. Our portfolio in Colombia includes working with both private and public landowners. And I think it's different, right? Because the private landowners need to come and say they want to do this rather than working with government agencies. But I think that you can actually sometimes have an even bigger impact by working with those private landowners and making the argument that by including conservation measures on their land, you can really actually have a much bigger impact. And so, for example, something that we're looking to start doing is building out regenerative agriculture programs where we make the case that, hey, if you put in some extra trees to create a corridor for birds, you can actually maybe bring some bird tourists to your site and have extra income in addition to what you're already getting from your cattle ranching. I don't know if you want to add anything to that, Andrew.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And ABC certainly supports the creation of private reserves. As mentioned earlier in my presentation, we've helped establish over 90 reserves in Latin America. And the reserve creation, of course, is only part of it. But then as Liz is kind of alluding to, the ability to maintain those reserves is a real challenge. Certainly, ABC has invested in the tourism component of many of these reserves to be able to bring some dollars to the reserves through bird tourism to be able to sustain them. But we recognize, and especially in a COVID world, that's going to be a challenge to continue to bring that income in. So we have to continue to look for alternatives outside of just philanthropic opportunities, to continue to get support for park guards and education for communities around those reserves so that there's less influence from the outside on those reserves. And so here, again, is an opportunity for integrating some of the different concepts for shade production, silvopasture, and other kinds of products and land uses that might be going on already on the reserve or around them to try to bring in some additional money to help support that reserve.
Okay, there's still a few questions out there. I propose that the presenters will have a look at them and we try to answer them and communicate back to the people who asked your views on a few things. Back to you, Itala.
Thank you, Barend. Well, just to summarize key ideas shared during the two presentations, Andrew told us that migratory birds are in trouble and they need us to make immediate action. He also said that it's important to ensure migratory bird conservation at the land scale level. He also talked about the importance of working with producers to improve productive practices that can benefit birds, but also need to help producers improve links to markets and to get better prices for the sustainable products. He talked a bit about how we can bring sustainable development together with bird conservation for larger benefits. And then Liz mentioned that Audubon is making efforts to elevate their conservation impact with the Boreal program expanding protection to 50% of the landscape by 2050. She also mentioned with bird-based tourism in Colombia and beyond in an effort to both drive bird conservation and sustainable development, and with coastal resilience strategy elevating impact with a new project that will include mangrove carbon in Panama's NDCs. It's also interesting to know that they will be launching their international business plan by the end of the year, and we can wait to see it. Those are the main points they share with us. I think we have 7 minutes. Maybe Baron, Gabby, you can choose a couple of additional questions.
Sure. How about you, Gabby? It's tough choices.
Yes. We have two questions that are very similar, so I'll choose one of them. This is from Andres Iglesias. He says, thank you for your presentation. This question is for both the speakers. During this year, we have witnessed the loosening of conservation policies and laws all around the world due to a necessity to restart the economy in all countries. What do you think the future for these initiatives and in general for migratory birds conservation efforts will be in a post-pandemic scenario, especially considering that tourism will have a high impact for at least a couple of years? So, Andrew, please.
Sure. Yeah, that's a difficult and somewhat scary question in my opinion. We've been hearing about in different countries these kind of activities going on, illegal cutting of forests, in part because there is less ability to perhaps put a stop to it due to the pandemic. I'm hoping that with improvement in COVID protocols and management, public health, security, that some of the short-term impacts can be mitigated, and that kind of activity doesn't continue for a long time. I think that the longer-term impact is likely to be from travel and the tourism sector and the difficulty in being able to do that. Liz touched on it a little bit, but maybe that's an opportunity for innovation. We've actually been talking with a company called Digital Fountain Labs in the UK, and they have different apps for products like Oculus and Sony PlayStation, people that use virtual reality headsets. And they're developing products for people to go, visit reserves in Africa to see wildlife up close. And so, maybe there's, new ways that we need to think about tourism and how we can get economic support for these reserves outside of just having people visit in person.
That sounds neat. I'd like to check that out. I would just add to that I think that it makes it even more important to be able to make an economic argument for the types of conservation activities we moving forward, right? Because all of these economies and all of these governments will really just be thinking about money, right? They're going to be thinking about bottom lines. And so I think it's important for us as the conservation community to bring those economic arguments for what we're doing, right? I mean, we all know that a lot of times these detrimental environmental impacts are not included in the equation. And so I think it's up to us to include the equation to put forward solutions that are equitable and that, really make sure that the environment has a voice at the table as we continue to move forward and work with governments and other groups abroad.
Thank you, Liz. I think with that, we're going to close. Baron, you have a couple of final reminders for people?
Yeah, so this was really interesting. Thank you all for joining this webinar. Let me put on my screen. So yeah, is this the correct screen?
Yes.
Yes, good.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, so this is only part of the celebration of migration we're doing at the end of this year. So I just want to run you through a few more things that you can participate in. So it's going too quickly. Sorry, I'm not good at this. Okay, so there's another. This is horrible. Apologies, guys. I put up the wrong one. So the first one I wanted to say is that there are a number of other webinars happening in the Americas. So tomorrow there's one in Spanish, and on the 16th there's another one in Spanish, which will be promoted by the same channels as you have received news about this webinar. Also on World Migratory Bird Day, there will be some activities organized by BirdLife in the Americas, and I will talk more about what will happen the weekend afterwards. Another, which might not reach you because this is a global webinar, there's a webinar on the magic of migrations, and that's more or less celebrating the successful stories of the conservation actions for migratory birds. So please check out the BirdLife website or your regular social media for BirdLife updates, and you will find how you can register on this one for the 14th. Then there's something I want to emphasize. You in the Americas are well aware about the eBird October bird watching. This year they're doing it slightly different. There's a collaboration between eBird, Swarovski, Global Birding, a new outfit, and BirdLife. And essentially it's about getting as many as possible people go out birding on the weekend of the 17th and the 18th. They establish lists on eBird and they all collated. And the challenge is we want to see as many birds as possible within one weekend. So by all teams in the whole world. And the other challenge is we want to see as many people go bird watching in a single event. So you can sign up as an individual or a team. Once you entered, there are prizes to be won. I think there's a holiday, and I think there's a Swarovski equipment. And alongside it is also a fundraising for the BirdLife illegal trade campaign in Asia. So if you want to know more information about this, please check out www.globalbirding.org. And if you have any further questions, don't hesitate to contact my colleague Jim Lawrence. That's it from my side. Back to Itala.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Andrew and Liz. Amazing work, you guys. And we hope to see you in the rest of our webinars. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So.